Live, where news comes first. This is ABC-7 Extra.
Good evening, I'm Maria Garcia. Glad you're with us this evening. It has been 2 years since El Paso voters overwhelmingly decided to take on about $500 million, almost $500 million in debt to improve the quality of life here in El Paso, one of the most historical and consequential decisions in the history of the city. Now, these projects range from parks to pools, an arena, a children's museum, cultural centers, a huge investment that residents approved. And the city is in the middle of the hard part right now, ensuring the projects are completed on time and on budget and as voters approved them. Now, this week, a development that some saw as a red flag, a project significantly over budget, city staff saying they didn't do the proper analysis when they initially set the project's original budget. We're going to get to that. Joining us tonight is City Rep Dr. Michiel No, who raised some concerns about that specific project, and Chair of the Bond Overview Advisory Committee, Bernie Sargent. Remember, you can be part of our program today by emailing us your questions or your comments to ABC-7 Extra at KVIA.com. You can also call us at 915-496-1775. On Twitter, you can tweet me at MariaGABC7 or with the hashtag ABC7Extra. Now, before we get to our discussion, let's take a look at this week's developments.
It went from $8 million to over $13 million. I mean, my budget hasn't gone up 1 cent, but suddenly the other one has almost doubled. Yeah, typical El Paso politics.
That was City Rep Dr. Michiel No on Monday when City Council found out city employees underestimated the cost of a West Side competition-style pool approved by voters. When voters approved this project in 2012, the city said it could build the pool with $8 million. City employees and the hired architect in situ now say they need $13.6 million to build the competition pool. That's a more than 50% increase. The architect says plans for the 50-meter pool haven't changed, but the city's Parks and Rec director told me city employees underestimated the price because they did not do the proper analysis. This upsets City Representative Michiel No, whose Eastside district is also in line for a voter-approved competition pool. No said the swimming community won't say it publicly, but they prefer this over budget West Side pool, and there aren't enough swimmers in the city to support both that one and the East Side pool.
There are members of the swimming community that think the East Side should not have a pool, and they've made that very clear to me. They've said it's a stupid idea. I've also been told that the swimming community will come out en masse to try to get me to not be reelected if I don't support giving my pool to them. And I will not support that. I've said it in there, and I'll say it again. If I don't fight this, I don't deserve to be reelected.
I think he perhaps feels a little fearful that once one facility is built, that the community will desert him and that we will not support him to get his facility built, and that's not the case.
The pool is just one of the $473 million worth of projects the city promised to voters. In 2013, City Council authorized spending more than $100 million in the first 3 years of the program. To date, it's committed more than $34 million. 5 parks have been completed, 8 other projects are under construction, and 27 others right now are under design.
All right, a lot to get to. Let's start with our conversation. City Rep Dr. Michiel No joining us now, and Bernie Sargent, the chair of the Bond Oversight Advisory Committee. Thank you so much for staying up late with us.
Thank you. Oh, you're welcome.
So let's start with what was a bit unsettling this week. City employees saying they underestimated the cost of this pool on the west side. Is this going to happen with other projects, you think, where the city promised the voters one price, but it turns out it was over budget?
Well, certainly as we go through these, you can run up against this sort of stuff. But with the whole pool thing, it was originally budgeted as 2 pools, one $12 million, one $8 million. And my recollection of it was never that they were supposed to be 2 competition pools, but in the ordinance it does state that. Right. So suddenly we're trying to build 2 competition pools. My argument wasn't that we wanted to put another competition pool on the west side. My argument was the transparency on how to fund it. I thought that that was being pushed through without letting the public know how we were going to fund it. And I was being approached by more than one person saying that once it's built on the west side, we will no longer need the east side. That's what upset me. Now, that's been completely cleared up now. I'll support the west side getting their pool. We'll help them fund it as long as it's transparent, and that's going to happen. The public will know how we're going to increase the budget on that and how that's going to be paid for. And the east side is going to get the pool that it was promised as well. So the city needs the swimming facilities. This region needs the swimming facilities. And I do think that El Paso can support that.
And, you know, it's clear voters agreed with that. 74%, I think, of voters voted for this quality of life bond in 2012. There's no question that El Paso residents think that these facilities are needed. But, for example, I think in the private sector, right, if you have a boss and your boss gives you a project and a budget, and then later on you tell your boss, hey, boss, turns out I'm 50% over budget, in most private sector jobs, that would not be acceptable. So why is that happening in the city, and why is it acceptable?
Well, what I see is that it's not that the cost went up, it was that the scope of the project went up. I never remember that being a competition quality pool.
No, the architects, though, repeatedly said this week the scope did not change. You gave us direction, you told us to build a competition pool, we built it,
Right.
But the Parks and Rec director told me that they just didn't do the proper analysis of how much it would cost.
Well, I can't speak for the Parks and Rec director, but like I said, I don't recall that being that type of pool. It was put in as an $8 million 50-meter pool, but not necessarily a competition-style facility. However, that's what the West Side have been pushing to get, and we're going to go ahead and give that to them. It's just a matter of how we're going to fund it. And I think we've got the funding sources worked out now. We just need to let the public know, do the proper vetting, and then move forward with the projects and put two competition-style 50-meter pools in El Paso, one on either side of town.
And I should say, this week you told city employees to go back to the drawing table, find a way to reduce the cost of the pool and find funding sources.
Well, not necessarily to reduce the cost of the pool, but make sure that if there's any savings in it, any way possible. I had sent an email to the city manager saying, you know, is it too late to realize any savings on changing it to a design-build sort of thing? Or is there any other method of building this thing that would bring down the cost? And they're quickly looking over any sort of mechanism that might help us bring down the cost. Even a few percentage points would help at this point.
Okay. Bernie, I want to ask you this question. You're chair of the Bond Overview Advisory Committee, essentially tasked with making sure these projects are implemented smoothly. A lot on your plate here. We heard city employees this week tell City Council that this specific project had not been presented to your committee.
That's correct.
Why not?
That's a good question. And I asked that question. They said there was a sense of urgency that they had to move forward on this. And they invited all the BOAC members to attend the City Council meeting on an extremely short notice. And I was a little concerned by the fact that it's maybe 3 or 4 weeks difference of time between this meeting at the City Council and our next scheduled BOAC meeting, which is January 15th at 9:30 in the morning. Why couldn't we wait and at least discuss it at that point in time? And there was really no valid point other than they said we had to get started on the project. But as the good doctor said, that there's just so much here that has to be finessed before we even get started, before we can put a shovel in the ground.
Well, and essentially the public taxpayers are trusting you, the BOAC, this committee, to ensure that these projects are implemented the way they approved them in 2012. So is that concerning to you that here's a project that's over budget, but you guys didn't have a chance to ask questions?
Correct.
You guys didn't get, a presentation on it? I know you got some emails from what I understand, but it's not like you guys had a meeting on it.
Well, we got the emails on Thursday, late Thursday afternoon and early into the evening. And Friday, as you know, the city's closed down, or the employees are not there. So there was no questions to be asked, no time to ask the questions. It is disconcerting to a lot of us that this is taking place. We'd like to follow the procedures that were outlined in the preparation for this vote that we had back in November. and have a little opportunity to
All right,
discuss
well,
these kinds of things.
First off, I would like to say
Okay.
that
All right. We have
And this
to.
is exactly the point that I made Monday, was that I wasn't comfortable with just the process that was going on, the transparency of what was happening and how we were doing it. We hadn't even brought it to BOAC at all.
Right.
I would like for it to be passed through them first before we even consider funding it.
And I think what was concerning to some city reps and members of the public who were there is that the initial plan that city staff presented to you included shifting some money around from other parks, but also taking out $2 million in debt to make up for the shortfall of the pool. And so here you have a plan where you're taking out debt to fund a voter-approved debt project.
Right.
So there's this reliance on debt that I think can be disconcerting.
And that's the responsibility of council to make a decision on whether or not the city should do that. But in shifting projects from one to another, I think the BOAC needs to be involved in that.
Okay. We have a caller. We have Richard from Central El Paso on the phone. Richard, what's your comment or your question?
All right. Well, first off, I would like to say that this will greatly improve the quality of life of our swimming community. And while these troubles have come up, I think that we should barrel through them.
Okay. Thank you so much, Richard. That was from Richard saying we should barrel through these troubles. The pools are worth it. We have to take a break. When we come back, the timeline for these projects. We heard from Woody Hunt and Paul Foster this week saying that the city should implement these projects earlier so that they can save money. We're going to be right back. Stay with us. Remember, you can call us at 496-1775, email us at ABC7Xtra at KVIA.com, and tweet us at MariaGABC7. Stay with us. Welcome back to ABC7 Extra. We're talking about the 2012 Quality of Life Bond projects approved by voters and the progress with that. I want to get to a question about the timeline for these projects. A lot of people a little bit surprised that learning that the city doesn't expect to finish some of these, at least the major projects, until 2022. We heard from Woody Hunt, from Paul Foster. They spoke at an event this week saying that the city should really take advantage of historically low interest rates and start moving on these projects as soon as possible, because the longer you wait, the more expensive they're going to be. Thoughts on that?
I think most people on council agree with that. That right now, if you get the debt at the interest rates that you've got right now, you're going to be paying back far less money than if we wait 5-6 years down the road to start some of these, especially the larger projects. You know, if the interest rates go up again, with this size of a bond project, it's going to cost millions of dollars more. So do you increase the budget to finish what you've got, or do you decrease the scope to get it in on budget? And the longer we wait for some of these larger projects, that sort of scenario is going to play out. And so we're trying to avoid that right now. There is a push certainly by myself, to get some of these larger projects out quicker at these low interest rates.
Like what? Like the arena, the Children's Museum?
Personally, I'd like to see the arena go out quickly. I certainly would like to see my regional park completed quickly.
On the east side, a huge regional park.
I mean, the regional park on my side of town will also include the aquatic center. It'll also include a senior center and a recreation center and all these other things. These are brick and mortar that are going to cost a lot of money if we wait a long time to put them out. Now, sure, we can build flat fields, football fields, soccer fields very quickly, but in the long run, is it going to be most cost effective by putting them in first, or the brick and mortar in first? And so I'm really pushing to try to get all of that done as quickly as possible. And just on my personal side, I would go for the arena as well. That's a huge project.
Huge.
And if we can get that in at a low interest rate, it'll save our taxpayers a lot of money.
Right. It's a balancing act, though, because you have to manage the debt that the city already has. Bernie, you were saying that the city is looking at about $2 billion in debt.
They're rapidly approaching $2 billion in debt. So there's a concern as a taxpayer that we do these as efficiently as possible, as quickly as possible, and where it makes sense to do it, and so we can save a little bit of money for you and me.
Right. And so you were talking about inflation and how that can affect the projects.
Well, the three key projects we're looking at right now with the Children's Museum, Hispanic Culture Center, or Culture Center, and the Multipurpose Arena, by the year 2020, with the average inflation rate of 1.75%, you're looking at about almost $15 million increase in cost because of inflation. So we have to do these efficiently and smartly, and do them, as Dr. No said, as quickly as possible.
I want to get to some of the emails we've had. We've had 2 emails on this subject, actually. This is from Lisa. She says, why would you not put public restrooms in the park project downtown? She's talking about San Jacinto Plaza. There are no restrooms near, and if pedestrian traffic increases due to events, shopping, and baseball, where do they go?
Well, that's a pretty simple answer to that. The park isn't big enough to have that. We have a policy of the park needs to be 12 acres. Otherwise, it doesn't have a bathroom. And to say that there's no bathrooms nearby is a fallacy. All of the businesses around there are required by ordinance to allow people to go in and use the restroom in there. So to spend $500,000 on a bathroom and the type of maintenance that that type of bathroom would require just doesn't warrant it. And then tell the mothers whose children play in these larger parks, 8-9 acre parks, whose children don't have bathrooms because of the same ordinance, that those parks don't deserve a bathroom. That's just not fair.
So is it time to revisit that ordinance, or do you think
Well, and we pushed to try to bring down the number of acres a little bit to try to get more bathrooms in parks, but bathrooms are not cheap, and we do have a lot of small parks. If you're going to put a bathroom in every park, it's going to cost quite a bit of money. We ran the numbers before, and nobody's really willing to spend that just yet on putting bathrooms in the parks. It's not just the capital improvement, it's the ongoing operations and management and maintenance of those bathrooms.
Okay, Robert says the merchants around there will not allow you to use their restrooms. You said they're required by city ordinance?
Right.
Okay. Okay, even if you're not a customer?
If you're not a customer, you have to let them use the bathroom.
Okay, all right. We have another caller, Anna from the Lower Valley. Anna, what's your comment or your question?
There is a project on Alameda and Carolina that the land has been allocated for a library, recreation center, and a senior center. Apparently we have to wait 10 years to get some building structures going on. Can you explain why we have to wait so long? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anna is saying Alameda and Carolina, there's a project slated there for a library and a senior center, but she's been told it's going to take 10 years to see it come to fruition. Wants to know if you can explain why, either of you.
You could probably best have that conversation with the representative that is with that area. Perhaps the representative felt that there were other projects that had priority. I can't speak for that person. It's not in my district. I don't know. But we all went to the table and put forth our best ideas on what we would like to see. First, we all had a list of priorities, and apparently that wasn't in her district's top 3 things to do. I don't know that for a fact, but you know, I would start by talking to the representative with that area.
Also, to add to that, I think that there's a misconception that the voters have that there's this pot of money all of a sudden showing up that we can spend. They still have to sell the bonds to finance all of this work that they're going to do. So to what Dr. No was saying, they prioritize the projects within each district based on the money that they could secure the quickest so that they could move forward on some of the projects.
Okay, talking about the pot of money, about money. Taxpayers agreed to take on the debt. There's no doubt about that. But that includes the construction of the projects. It doesn't include operation and maintenance. So that's going to have to come from the city's general fund in the future. And when you have the city building dozens of new facilities in the next decade, that's going to cost money every year. And if you're looking at $2 billion in debt for the city, how do you manage a growing general fund of daily operation maintenance plus your debt management?
You have to have some very good programming. I mean, like for the arena, you're going to want that thing operational as much as you possibly can. You're going to try to sell as many seats, as many luxury areas as you possibly can. You're going to try to sell food and drink in there as much as you can. That's what we're going to do with all the areas. With the natatorium, same thing. I want to program that thing every day of the year if I can. If they're not in there practicing or competing, I want kids in there playing. I want people in there learning how to swim. I want people in there getting physical therapy in the water. I want to program those as much as possible to generate as much much money as possible out of each and every one of these. Now, there's some of them that we're not going to be able to
Yeah, I mean, you heard
generate funds
city
from.
staff saying libraries don't make money, parks don't make money generally, pools don't make money.
Well, they can make a lot more. El Paso is notoriously low in our fees. If you look nationwide, we don't even come close to national averages on what we charge. And when we try to charge a little bit more, we get a lot of pushback. I mean, even from the library, when we started charging people that don't even pay into the system, when we started charging county residents that live outside the city, the city limits, we got a lot of grief from that, from county residents. You know, how can you possibly charge us to go use your libraries? When they can still use it for free, they just can't check out a book without paying. You know, we try our very best to have very low fees, below the national average, and those days may be coming to an end. We may have to start charging the regular price, the national average, for what it actually costs to run these things.
Now, surely, though, you're going to hear the argument from taxpayers saying the salaries here are not your national average salaries. People just don't make a lot of money.
And that's one of the reasons why
here.
we do charge less. We understand that we have a high poverty rate in this city, but you can't have a city with the types of things that they're asking for and not either tax more to keep it up or charge more to the end user, which some people think is fair. If it's the swimmers using this, charge the swimmers the entrance fee, or the competitors, charge them for the lane rental for practicing, things like that.
Okay.
A lot of people say, you know, just charge the end user, don't charge me, I don't use it.
Okay, we have to take another break. When we come back, I want to talk about something a city representative said this week, saying that there are glaring inequalities of projects for some districts. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. So stay with us. We're going to take more of your comments and your questions after the break. Call us, email us, tweet us at Maria G. ABC-7, 496-1775, or ABC-7 Xtra at KVIA.com. We'll be right back. We're back to ABC-7 Extra. We're talking about the Quality of Life 2012 bond and the projects. City Rep Lily Limon said this week that there are, quote, glaring inequalities of projects for some districts, saying that there are more projects scheduled for the west side and downtown that there are in her district or in Emma Acosta's district on the east side or East Central. What do you think about that? Bernie.
Well, that question has come up a couple of times. One way I addressed it with several of the city reps when they posed it to me in my capacity as chair is that historically their districts had received more money than the other districts. But if you look at, for instance, Representative Lamone's district, she right now has $18.6 million worth of projects. And you look at Claudia Ordaz, she has $7.3 million. Now,
That's including that's the Lower Valley.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, down that part of the city. But you know, in Representative Ordaz's district, she has a lot more projects, but they're lower per project in value as far as expenses going. So the number of projects. I mean, if the number of projects means so much, we could maybe have to look at reducing the number of the value and putting more projects in. It doesn't hold water on paper.
Okay. There is this perceived notion from some members on council, I think some members of the public, that downtown and the west side gets more attention.
Well, in fact, if you look at what Ann Morgan Lilly got, she's way down there on the chain also as far as the dollar value. Now, it's unfair to compare Courtney's projects because a lot of those are projects that are utilized by the entire city.
And that's downtown.
And that's downtown. So if you throw that into the mix, then it does look like there's a terrible imbalance between the different representatives. I don't think there is.
And there's been some tension between City Representative Courtney Nyland and City Representative Lily Limon. It appears in the last couple of weeks that
rumors.
that it's eased up. But how does that affect your policy making when you have this very tangible tension?
Well, I don't think it affects most of us very much at all. We just, you know, endure and get through it. But it has, like you said, eased quite a bit. Mm-hmm. It apparently affects them more than anybody else on council, as you've seen from the moves of the seats and everything. The rest of us have been able to work through it.
Okay. we have a question about the pool. A lot of people asking. We have a tweet. Let me see. This is where I had it. Let me pull it up here. This is from Adrian. Why was the $8 million original budget not met? Was it just budgeted without soft costs, fees, and contingencies? Dr. No, if you can address that.
My recollection is it was budgeted for a 50-meter pool and not a competition-style pool. Now, there are others that will disagree with me on that, but I'll go back and get all the video and the notes from prior meetings and everything. But to my recollection, it was never supposed to be a competition pool, and so therefore it wasn't budgeted as one. Now it's going to be a competition pool, and I'm going to help them make sure that they get that as well.
Right, and there seemed to be a discrepancy there. I mean, the Parks and Rec director told me it was always supposed to be a competition pool, yet the competition pool on the east side, we did budget for $12 million
well, how can you
or
say
$16 million.
It was always
but
supposed
this
to be the exact same thing, but you budget $12 million for one and $8 million for other. How
Right.
can you say that we meant it to be the exact same thing? That's just wasn't the case, but it's going to be the exact same thing.
Right. I asked that question. They told me they just didn't do the proper analysis, but you...
I don't know. I mean, we spent a lot of time with USA Swimming, and I'm told that those were the numbers that USA Swimming gave us
Right.
for a pool like that, and the numbers that USA Swimming gave us for a pool like the one on the east side, and so that's what we trusted and went with. So if there were discrepancies, it apparently came from the swimming community's experts, which we relied on the design of this thing. Mm-hmm. But I don't really think it was a discrepancy in budgeting so much as it is now that we're seeing the need for it and trying to increase the scope on that side.
Are there other projects where the scope is going to expand, Bernie, or that you've seen has expanded?
There's a fear, yes, that will happen. As we were alluding to with the swimming pool, the realization of the cost of a project based on today's prices and based on more factual information certainly does impact the price and the cost of the project itself. So there is concern that this is going to happen going forward.
This is going to happen more, where you're going to see the budget of a project go up because the scope is increasing.
Yeah, and we're hoping that doesn't happen so much. But you know, one of the problems we have with people that are bidding on something that we have on a line item is they look at it and say, okay, we have a $4 million project. I'm going to bid as close to $4 million as possible because that's what the city is expecting to pay. So you know, there's no bartering involved, so to speak. You can't drive the prices down. You can't. You don't want to bid you don't want to go to the lowest bidder because oftentimes that comes back and bites you. So you want to do something a little bit more intelligent. But when somebody has $4 million on a piece of paper, you're going to go, I'm going to go for $4 million. And then you find out later that, well, we forgot this, this, and this, and then you got to go back and finesse the numbers once again, and then you know, come back to the BOAC and then back to City Council and say, okay, we really underestimated these projects.
But you know, if I'm a taxpayer and I'm listening to this at home, I'm thinking, but why wasn't this considered? I was told that that this project was going to cost this much, and now it's going to cost much more. And like I said, in the private sector, you couldn't go to your boss and say, hey, it turns out this is going to cost more, sorry, I need more money. So why is it okay to go back to the taxpayers and say, hey, we do need more money after all?
But I don't think we've seen that on project after project. We've got one individual project now that's questionable on whether it was underfunded or just increased in scope. You know, we're going to the public as much as we can with charrettes and with community meetings and trying to find out, okay, you're going to get your community center or a rec center or something in somebody's district. What do you want in it? And you know, when they give us our wish list, we go back and say, you know, that's a lot more than the other centers have, and it's going to cost a little bit more than we had planned. Are we going to go ahead and give it to them, or do we start telling them, you know what, give us a priority, we're going to have to cut some of this out? Because I mean, even in my regional park, there were, you know, wish lists for a BMX bike area and all this other stuff when we went through the shreds. And so, I mean, if you put everything that everybody wants when they come to these meetings, it really does increase the price. But if we can control that and just say, you know, here's what we've got, prioritize, and some of this we're going to have to wait on. We may hold the land in an area to build it in the future, but we just don't have it in this bond yet. And you're just going to have to be patient and wait for that part.
Okay.
And that's where the political battles are going to be for, you know, who gets what in these things.
And that has happened. You know, you asked where an example was. We had a park out on the east side where they wanted more property, but we didn't have the money to buy the property in the bond, so they had to take a smaller portion of it. And we're concerned that we're going to see more and more. The stuff we've seen so far is pretty small potatoes compared to some of these other line items. So the concern is there that as we get closer to these larger items, we're going to see some overruns or requests for overruns. And we
Okay.
just don't want to see that.
Okay, well, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Really insightful conversation. Dr. No, thank you for always being accessible. Thank
Always.
you for coming in.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you found this program informative and helpful, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.